introduce yourself.
So hello everybody, my name is Julie Hariano. I work at Tech Masters, and just want to start out the meeting and say that minds are like parachutes. They only work when they're open. And that was a quote from Jeff Kay. So I want to talk about today defining your marketplace, your market strategy. So one example that he gave was a Frito-Lay employee. The manager doesn't just say, put your chips anywhere. He doesn't say that. He says, you know, place them here in this area, place them in this specific retail place, place them in gas stations. He gives them a strategy. So the takeaway from that is more is not always more. One thing he also mentioned was when you're on a client call, there's 3 things that he said you should say. If you're in your niche, you have expertise. So when you call in, you say, I'd like to make you aware of my expertise in this marketplace. So that's one way to go in. And then another way to go in is to say, I just finished a search, and I have this amount of candidates that I can place in your position. And then the next one is market one individual, obviously MPC. And then he gave 3 key points of mastery objectives, market mastery objectives. Know every company in your market. That's going to be impressive if you know, for instance, if I know every software BI company and I can throw that out to candidates and to clients, that's going to be pretty impressive. The second one is know every candidate in your market. You know, if you're working on something for 6 months, even that short amount of time, you should know every candidate in your market. If I'm doing sales engineers, I should know them. You know, it's about how seriously we're taking this. And then the next one was know everything about everyone in your market. So know every company, know every candidate, and know everything about everyone. Those are the 3. Then he gave 17 insights. So, and I just want to say that everything he said is pretty much echoing what you guys have taught me. So that's definitely good for you guys. The first one was create profile on each company. He said kind of create a book. Some of the things he mentioned to get in there are moles, insiders of the company, magazines, even if you know if there's something about software companies in a magazine, that's good. Newsletters, obviously references you can put in your book or your electronic book. Blogs. Blogs is one thing I don't think we have done very much. I think you can find a blog on LinkedIn, maybe on the website, and then find an external link. Is one thing. Number 2 is names. You got to get names, obviously. You got to get references. And he said that that's the big challenge. And he said if you're not getting names, then you're not doing your job right. You're not creating enough value, just like Alex said. You need to create value before you ask them for something.
Hey Julie, how does he recommend getting those names? Did you get into that at all?
Yeah, I think I'm going to get into that.
Okay, great.
And then he said follow-up calls are the most productive. Which I was talking about yesterday. Follow-up calls are the most productive because you've already created value with them, and then you're stepping into a second interview. You actually have already set up an interview with them. So you can say, hey, I've set this interview up for you, you prep them, and then you ask them for that because they already know you, you've already talked to them, and you've already invested that time. So his recommendation was follow-up calls are the most productive name-gathering calls. And then the 4th thing was, if I'm pronouncing it right, bruising. You got to know how to bruise. When you call into a company, you're not going to say, hey, I'm calling to steal your candidate. I'm calling to pull them out of the company. You're not going to say that. So you got to go in there with a strategy. You got to go in there and know how to bruise. The 5th thing was job agent. This is one thing that I thought was really interesting. When you're talking to a candidate, you should say, you know, I'm going to set you up with these interviews, but, you know, one day I'm going to ask you for a favor. And every time you talk to them, you say, I'm going to ask you for a favor. I'm going to ask you for a favor someday. And then when that day comes, when you place him, or when you've helped him out and got him into that interview, you say, here's a favor. I need 3 candidates. Help me out with hiring into the company. So I thought that was interesting. And then the next thing is search recyclability. Any candidates that you have, anything that you're doing, just like you guys have been saying, it needs to be productive. You need to be able to place it into another company. You need to be able to use it again. Recyclability is very important. Water cooler questions, just like Alex was saying. You gossip. You know, you talk about the managers. You talk about the things that are going on in the marketplace, and then that's going to make them more open. Post generic jobs, I thought was interesting too. They don't have to be something that you're actually working on, but something that you can just post generic jobs, then that way you're going to get a candidate pool that you can just call on, and you'll always have people internally applying to you instead of having to make all the calls yourself. The next one is references. Obviously, references are very important. Competing search firm web searches. You know, you need to know your competition. You need to know what you're up against.
Wow.
So that's another thing he said. Conduct market research. The other thing I was thinking about the other day when I was listening to it was, you know, if you take something seriously, you're going to put time into it. You're going to study it. You know, it's just like a doctor. If you're doing surgery, you're not going to say, okay, I'm going to go in here and take your heart out. You need to know every little single piece in that. So we need to do search, and we need to be serious about our craft. Vendors, know your vendors. And this was a weird example that he used here. For instance, if you're trying to place pharmaceutical sales reps, call on the doctors that they've spoken to. Call on the pharmacies that they've been to and say, who would you recommend? What sales rep was a good fit for you? So I thought that was interesting. And then email and voicemail systems. This is something I've never heard before, which I thought was pretty good. When you call in, for instance, say there's a certain part of the marketplace. For instance, I don't know, a sales. If his extension is 333, most likely the other sales reps are going to be in that area. You know, and if you're calling on a smaller company, say for instance, I don't know, LogicXML, if you're calling on a smaller company, only 55 people, you can call in and get on that directory and come in early in the morning, write down every name. You know, every name in that company. You go to another software company, smaller company, you know every name. You look them up on LinkedIn, you see who they are, you know that that's a BI software company, and you know that you need BI software sales. So that was that. Organizing, building software, chart building, I'm just saying organizing is very important for your companies. This is something that Ramsey was telling me a lot, which I think is very important. When you ask a question, don't ask closed-ended questions. Ask open-ended questions. I mean, that's very important, because if you ask a closed-ended question, you're always going to get a yes or a no answer, or a one-worded answer. And then the last one was, have a secondary objective on every call. Make something out of every call. And then I'm almost finished here. These were just some other things that people were saying. You got to have a sense of humor. Jason does a good job of that. People enjoy working with people that they like. You got to have professionalism. Know the company's credentials. Know your candidate's credentials. And what benefit you're going to bring to the company, and what benefit you're going to bring to the candidate. Another thing that they mentioned that I think is very important, when we say we're going to do something, we should do it. We need to have integrity. We need to follow through. That's one reason candidates sometimes get annoyed when recruiters call, because recruiters say that we're going to set you up with this interview. They say we're going to send you an email, but we don't. Sometimes we don't do it. So we need to follow through. Get the research done first. One point that they made on there was, lawyers win battles during their research, not in the courtroom.
Wow.
And then references, again, we're saying references are so important. And then the biggest thing, another good thing that I got on there was the voicemail systems, calling into the voicemail systems. And one thing he mentioned was getting 2 interns to do that. This guy got 2 interns to come to his company. And then what they would do is they would call into the voicemail systems and get every name and do that type of research. And so that's pretty much what I have to say about that.